always thought the worst thing a wife could find in her husband's desk was a stray love letter or a hidden hotel receipt. I was wrong. When I pulled out those crisp, legally binding divorce papers, my heart shattered until I read the wife's name. It wasn't mine, and that was just the first lie. It was a Tuesday morning, painfully ordinary in every sense. The kind of morning where the smell of freshly brewed dark roast coffee still lingered in the kitchen, and the faint hum of the dishwasher provided a comforting background noise to my quiet house. My husband Nolan had left for the airport 2 hours earlier. He was a senior logistics consultant, or so his business card said, which meant he spent 3 to 4 days a week flying across the country. This week, it was supposed to be Chicago. I had the day off from my job as a physical therapist, and I was using the rare free time to finally tackle the mountain of life admin we had been putting off. Specifically, I needed to find our 5-year-old daughter Chloe's original birth certificate so we could apply for her first passport. We were planning a family trip to Italy for our 7th wedding anniversary. I searched my filing cabinet, the safe in the closet, and the kitchen junk drawer. Nothing. The only place left was Nolan's home office. Nolan was notoriously territorial about his workspace. He had this massive, antique mahogany desk that he bought at an estate sale when we first moved into our house in San Jose. The bottom right drawer was always locked. He kept the small brass key on his personal key ring, a silent boundary I had never felt the need to cross. We trusted each other. Or, at least, I thought we did. But that morning, as I knelt on the plush rug to check the unlocked upper drawers, my knee brushed against the bottom one. It shifted. I froze, looking down. The brass lock was turned, the drawer slightly ajar. In his frantic rush to make his 6 a.m. Uber to SFO, Nolan had forgotten to lock it. I didn't open it expecting to uncover a betrayal. I genuinely just thought the birth certificate might be in there. I pulled the heavy wood outward. Inside, it was obsessively organized. There were stacks of tax returns, a few old hard drives, and a thick, unmarked manila envelope resting at the very bottom. Thinking it might hold Chloe's documents, I unclasped the metal prongs and slid the contents out onto the floor. It was a stack of legal documents, printed on thick, premium paper. The word petition was typed in bold, aggressive letters at the top. I blinked, my brain struggling to process the heavy legal jargon. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My blood ran cold. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the office. Divorce papers. My husband had drawn up divorce papers. My hands began to tremble so violently that the edges of the paper rattled against each other. 7 years. We had been married for 7 years, and just last night, he had kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and talked about whether we should book a hotel in Rome or Florence. Tears immediately flooded my eyes, blurring the text. I wiped them away furiously, bracing myself to see my own name printed as the respondent. I forced my eyes to focus on the lines below the header. Petitioner, Nolan Gregory Hayes. Respondent, Vanessa Croft Hayes. I stopped breathing. I read it again. Vanessa Croft Hayes. I wiped my eyes again, thinking I was hallucinating. But the ink didn't change. I looked at the date of marriage listed in the filing, the 14th of August 2014. A deafening ringing filled my ears. Nolan and I met in the spring of 2016. We were married in June 2017. According to this legally binding, stamped document from the state of California, Nolan had married a woman named Vanessa 3 years before we tied the knot. And he was only just now, in 2026, filing to divorce her. He wasn't just leaving me. He wasn't even legally mine to begin with. I was a second wife, a secret wife. My marriage, my home, my daughter's legitimacy, it was all built on a colossal, suffocating mountain of perjury. A wave of intense nausea hit me. I dropped the papers on the carpet and scrambled to the attached guest bathroom, dry heaving over the sink. I splashed freezing water on my face, gripping the porcelain edges until my knuckles turned white, staring at my pale, terrified reflection. Think, Claire. Think. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. If I called him right now, screaming and crying, he would hang up, hire a ruthless lawyer, and hide whatever else he was keeping from me. I needed leverage. I needed the truth. I walked back into the office on shaking legs. I pulled out my phone and meticulously photographed every single page of the 30-page document. I captured the asset declarations, the addresses, the attorney contact information, everything. Then, with agonizing precision, I stacked the papers back together, slid them into the manila envelope, and placed it exactly where I had found it. I closed the heavy mahogany drawer, making sure it looked just as slightly ajar as he had left it. At 7 p.m. that night, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was Nolan. "Hey, beautiful!" His smooth, familiar voice drifted through the speaker. In the background, I could hear the faint clinking of silverware and ambient chatter. The sounds of a restaurant. "Hey," I managed to say, digging my fingernails into my palm to keep my voice steady. "How's Chicago?" "Freezing," he chuckled. It was a rich, warm sound that had once made my stomach flutter. Now, it made my skin crawl. Meetings went long today. "I'm just grabbing a quick bite at the hotel bar before crashing. How are you? How's Chloe?" "She's good." Drawing at the table, I lied. "Chloe was asleep. I miss you." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "I miss you too, Claire Bear. 3 more days and I'm back. I love you." "Love you too," I whispered and hung up. I walked over to the kitchen island, opened the bottle of Cabernet I had been staring at for 2 hours, and poured myself a generous glass. I pulled out my laptop, opened a private browsing window, and typed the name that was currently burning a hole in my mind. Vanessa Croft Hayes. It didn't take long to find her. Vanessa Croft wasn't a ghost. She was a titan. According to her impeccably curated LinkedIn profile, Vanessa was a senior partner at a massive venture capital firm based in San Francisco, just an hour and a half north of where I sat in San Jose. She was 42, 4 years older than Nolan. She had an MBA from Stanford. Her face, staring back at me from a Forbes article about women in tech investing, was striking. Sharp cheekbones, piercing dark eyes, and a sleek, expensive-looking bob. I scrolled through property records next, using the address listed on the divorce petition. It was a multi-million-dollar townhouse in Pacific Heights, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in San Francisco. Then I found her public Instagram. It was mostly sanitized. Professional posts, panel speaking engagements, charity galas, aesthetic shots of Napa Valley. But as I scrolled back to 3 years ago, I found a post tag number family vacation. My breath caught in my throat. It was Nolan. He was wearing the exact same navy linen shirt I had bought him for his birthday. He was smiling, his signature lopsided smile, holding a little boy who looked to be about 8 years old. Vanessa stood next to him, her hand resting intimately on his chest. "Happy 9th anniversary to my rock," the caption read. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't look at it anymore. I had shared a bed with this man for 7 years. I washed his clothes. I nursed him through the flu. I gave birth to his daughter. And all this time, he was driving up the 101 freeway to play house with a venture capitalist and their son. The next morning, after I dropped Chloe off at her kindergarten, I didn't go to the gym or run errands. I got in my SUV and merged onto the highway, pointing my car north toward San Francisco. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know that I hadn't lost my mind. The Pacific Heights townhouse was exactly as the address promised. A towering, pristine Victorian painted in a soft charcoal gray with heavy iron gates and flawless landscaping. I parked 2 blocks away, slouched low in the driver's seat, and waited. The fog was just starting to burn off the bay when the heavy oak front door opened. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Out walked Nolan, not in Chicago, in San Francisco. He was wearing his favorite gray cashmere sweater and jeans, holding a sleek black travel mug. He walked down the steps, completely relaxed, and opened the door of a black Range Rover parked in the driveway. A moment later, a boy in a private school uniform bounded out of the house, followed by Vanessa, who was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. Nolan kissed Vanessa on the cheek, a casual, practiced, deeply domestic kiss, before helping the boy into the back seat of the Range Rover. I sat in my car, trembling violently. A strange, animalistic sound ripped from my throat, a mix of a sob and a scream that I had to muffle with both hands. It was real. All of it was real. His consulting firm was a complete fabrication. His flights were just drives up the coast. For 7 years, he had been living a split life, commuting between 2 women, 2 children, 2 entire worlds. But as the initial shock subsided, the icy realization of the divorce papers flooded back into my mind. If Vanessa was the primary breadwinner, living in a $10 million house, why was Nolan the one filing for divorce? And why now? I drove back to San Jose in a daze, my mind racing. When I got home, I opened the folder on my phone containing the photos of the legal documents. I hooked my phone up to my printer and printed every single page. I spread them out across the dining room table, grabbing a highlighter and a red pen. I was going to read every single word of this petition. Page by page, the sinister reality of Nolan's plan revealed itself. In the asset declaration section, Nolan wasn't just asking for a standard divorce. He was claiming that he had entirely given up his own lucrative career to manage the household and raise their son, allowing Vanessa to climb the corporate ladder. Because California is a community property state, he was demanding 50% of everything she had earned during their 12-year marriage. But it was the financial disclosures that truly made my stomach churn. I found the address of our home in San Jose listed deep in the appendices, but it wasn't listed as a primary residence. It was listed under a shell corporation, Crestview Holdings, LLC. I quickly pulled up the California Secretary of State business search. I typed in Crestview Holdings, LLC. Registered agent, Vanessa Croft Hayes. I dropped the pen. The room spun. Nolan hadn't bought our house. Vanessa had. She bought it as an investment property, completely unaware that her husband had moved his second family into it. Nolan had been taking the mortgage payments I transferred to him every month from my physical therapy salary and pocketing them. He was using my hard-earned money as his personal slush fund while living rent-free in a property owned by his real wife. He was a parasite. He was feeding off both of us. And now, he was getting ready to nuke Vanessa's life, take half her fortune, and what? Come back to me in San Jose with a massive bank account claiming his consulting firm finally went public? Or was he going to dump me too, disappearing into the wind with millions of dollars? I sat at the table, surrounded by the highlighted papers of my fake marriage, and felt the hot, stinging tears dry up. The devastation was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. Nolan thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he had perfectly compartmentalized his victims. He had no idea I had the key to his little kingdom. I looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. Vanessa would be at her VC firm in the financial district. I picked up my phone, found the main switchboard number for her company online, and dialed. Highland Ventures. How may I direct your call? A crisp receptionist answered. Yes, I need to speak with Vanessa Croft, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's a personal matter. I'm sorry, Miss Croft is in meetings all afternoon. Can I take a message? I looked down at the photo of Nolan kissing her on the cheek. Tell her, I said slowly, that Claire from the San Jose investment property needs to speak with her. Tell her it's about Nolan. And tell her she needs to call me before I take what I have to her husband's divorce attorney. I hung up. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the other wife to call me back. Exactly 12 minutes after I hung up with the receptionist, my phone vibrated against the marble countertop. The caller ID displayed a San Francisco area code. I took a deep, steadying breath and swiped the green icon. Who is this? The voice on the other end was like cracking ice, sharp, cold, and dripping with authority. My name is Claire, I said, keeping my tone perfectly level. And unless I'm entirely mistaken about the state laws of California, we share a husband, Nolan Gregory Hayes. There was a profound, suffocating silence on the line. For a second, I thought she had hung up. Then, I heard the faint sound of a heavy door clicking shut. She had moved into a private office. "I don't know what kind of extortion scam this is," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. "But my husband is currently on a business trip in Chicago. And if you ever call my firm again—" "He's not in Chicago, Vanessa," I interrupted. "He's wearing a gray cashmere sweater, and at 8:15 this morning he kissed your cheek, put your son into a black Range Rover, and kissed you goodbye. I know this because I was parked 2 blocks away." I paused, letting the reality sink in before delivering the fatal blow. "And I know about the divorce petition he filed behind your back. Docket number fam, 92847. He's going after half of everything you've built, while keeping me tucked away in the San Jose house you own." I heard a sharp intake of breath. The titanium armor cracked. We agreed to meet exactly halfway, at an upscale, dimly lit hotel lounge in Palo Alto. When I arrived, Vanessa was already seated in a secluded corner booth. In person, she was even more intimidating, dressed in a flawless navy blazer, her posture rigidly perfect. But up close, I could see the faint tremor in her hands as she gripped her crystal tumbler of scotch. I slid into the booth opposite her and laid the thick manila envelope on the polished mahogany table. She didn't say a word. She just reached into her designer tote, pulled out a pair of reading glasses, and began to read the highlighted pages of her own impending financial ruin. I watched the blood slowly drain from her face. "He told me this house was an income property," Vanessa murmured, her voice hollow as she stared at my address. "He said he was renting it out to a group of Stanford engineers. He managed all the property taxes, the maintenance. I never even looked at the deed." "And his consulting firm?" I asked quietly. "A front," she replied, her eyes narrowing as they darted across the asset declaration page. "He told me he was building a logistics startup in the South Bay. That was his excuse for spending 3 days a week down here. I funded the initial seed capital. $2 million. My stomach plummeted. He told me he was a senior consultant. His flights across the country were just his days back home with you in San Francisco. He's been taking my salary to pay a fake mortgage to himself. But Vanessa, look at page 18. I flipped the document over. I had spent the afternoon scrutinizing the financial disclosures, and something had felt horribly wrong. Vanessa's expertly trained eyes scanned the columns. Suddenly, she let out a sharp, breathless gasp. The Cayman accounts. "I don't know anything about venture capital," I said, leaning in closer. "But I know what hiding money looks like. He's not just filing for divorce to get half your assets. He's been quietly transferring your liquid capital into offshore LLCs under his name. The divorce is just a smokescreen to tie you up in family court while he disappears with the actual cash." Vanessa slowly took off her glasses. The shock in her eyes was melting, rapidly crystallizing into something far more dangerous. Pure, unadulterated vengeance. "He thought I was just a blind, rich workaholic," Vanessa whispered, a terrifyingly calm smile touching the corners of her lips. "And he thought you were just a naive domestic incubator." "He underestimated both of us," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Claire," Vanessa said, picking up her scotch and raising it slightly. "How would you like to completely dismantle our husband?" For the next 4 hours, sitting in that dark booth, we didn't cry over our broken hearts. We didn't fight over who Nolan loved more. We both realized he only loved himself. Instead, we became the architects of his absolute destruction. Vanessa had access to a team of ruthless corporate lawyers and forensic accountants. I had the keys to his San Jose sanctuary, his laptop, and his physical files. By the time we walked out of that hotel, Nolan Hayes was already a dead man walking. He just didn't know it yet. Friday afternoon arrived with a nauseating sense of anticipation. Nolan's flight from Chicago was supposed to land at 4 p.m., meaning he would pull into the San Jose driveway by 5:30. I had spent the morning sending Chloe over to my sister's house for a sleepover. The house was dead quiet. At exactly 5:15 p.m., Vanessa's sleek silver Porsche Panamera glided silently into my driveway, pulling straight into the garage. I closed the garage door behind her. She stepped out, wearing a stunning blood-red trench coat. We exchanged a single, Resolute nod. At 5:42 p.m., the front door unlocked. "Claire Bear, I'm home!" Nolan's booming, cheerful voice echoed through the hallway. I heard the familiar thud of his leather duffel bag hitting the hardwood floor. I was sitting in the living room, a glass of Cabernet in my hand. I forced my face into a relaxed, welcoming mask. "In here, honey." Nolan walked into the living room, his face lit up with that boyish, lopsided smile that had once convinced me to marry him. He was wearing a fresh button-down, looking completely unbothered. "God, I missed you," he said, walking toward me with his arms open. O'Hare was a nightmare. Delays across the board. "Where's Chloe?" "She's at my sister's for the night," I said, not standing up to greet him. I took a slow sip of my wine. I thought we could have a quiet evening, just the two of us, and a guest. Nolan froze, his brow furrowed in confusion. "A guest? Who?" Right on cue, the double doors of my husband's prized mahogany home office clicked open. Vanessa stepped out into the hallway, leaning casually against the doorframe. She held his little brass desk key, tossing it lightly in the air and catching it. "Hello, darling," Vanessa purred. "How was Chicago?" If I live to be 100 years old, I will never forget the look on Nolan's face. It was as if his soul had been violently ripped from his body. His jaw went slack, his eyes bulged, and all the color drained from his face until he looked like a wax figure. He staggered backward, his knee hitting the edge of the coffee table. "Vanessa?" he stammered, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched squeak. He looked frantically between the two of us, his brain short-circuiting as his two entirely separate universes collided in my living room. "What? What are you doing here? Claire, what is she doing here?" "I own the house, Nolan," Vanessa said, walking slowly into the living room. "I can visit my investment properties whenever I please. Though, I must admit, I wasn't expecting to find my husband playing house with my tenant. This isn't what it looks like." Nolan panicked, holding his hands up like a cornered animal. He looked at me, his eyes wide with desperate manipulation. "Claire, listen to me. She's crazy." "She's an ex. She's been stalking me." "Shut up, Nolan," I snapped, the sheer force of my voice making him flinch. I stood up, picking up the thick manila envelope from the coffee table and slamming it against his chest. "We read the divorce petition. We also read the wire transfer logs from your locked drawer." Nolan looked down at the envelope, and the last shred of fight left his body. His shoulders slumped. The charade was over. Okay, fine," he breathed, running a trembling hand through his hair. His facade of the loving husband instantly vanished, replaced by a cold, cornered arrogance. "You got me. You figured it out. So what? Vanessa, you know the law. We're legally married. You still have to give me half. And Claire, you're not legally my wife at all, so you get absolutely nothing. I'll pack my bags." "Oh, you're definitely packing your bags," Vanessa smiled, a terrifying carnivorous grin. "But you're a bit behind on the news. Over the last 48 hours, my forensic accountants traced every single penny you tried to offshore. Highland Ventures' legal team just froze all of your dummy LLCs. The funds have already been rerouted back into a trust for my son." Nolan's arrogant sneer faltered. "You can't do that. It's marital property." "Actually, it's stolen property," Vanessa corrected him smoothly. "You forged my signature on the initial wire transfers. That's wire fraud, Nolan. Federal wire fraud. And because you used the U.S. Postal Service to mail those documents to the Cayman Registry, that's mail fraud. And as for me getting nothing," I chimed in, crossing my arms. "Vanessa and I had a lovely chat with a real estate attorney yesterday. She transferred the deed of this San Jose house into an irrevocable trust for Chloe. You have zero claim to it." Nolan began to hyperventilate. "You bitches," he spat, his face turning a mottled, furious purple. "You think you can just strip me of everything? I'll sue you both. I'll drag you through the courts for a decade. You're going to be a little too busy for civil court," I said softly. Suddenly, the unmistakable flash of red and blue lights illuminated the living room curtains, washing Nolan's terrified face in alternating neon colors. Heavy footsteps marched up my front walkway. In the state of California, I said, listening to the heavy knock on my front door, bigamy isn't just a fun little secret, Nolan. It's a felony, punishable by up to 3 years in state prison. Add that to the grand larceny and wire fraud. You won't be seeing the outside of a cell until you're a very old, very poor man. Nolan fell to his knees on the rug, weeping, begging us to call them off. But neither of us moved. Vanessa walked to the front door and opened it for the 2 San Jose police officers. She pointed directly at the man, sobbing on the floor. "Officers," she said, her voice echoing perfectly through the quiet house. "That's the man you're looking for." It's been 2 years since they took Nolan away in handcuffs. He took a plea deal for the fraud and bigamy to avoid a massive federal trial, and he's currently serving his sentence in a state penitentiary. Vanessa and I actually stayed close. We took that trip to Italy, just me, Chloe, Vanessa, and her son. We built a beautiful family from the wreckage he left behind. If this story had your heart racing, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a crazy plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable true drama.